Hi, friends. Welcome back to Extraordinary Connection. My name is Dillon Burns. I'm the pastor at Manchester United Methodist Church, and so glad to be back with you for another of our daily devotionals. Friends, a few weeks ago, my wife and I had our first child. It has been a joy and an adventure as we have brought him home and begun to truly be parents for the very first time. My life is filled these days with the changing of diapers and trying to convince a small human that it's time to sleep in those moments when he would least like to sleep. It's been an adventure, filled with all sorts of wonderful moments, of course. One of my favorites is the chance to get to read to him. Now, he's only a few weeks old. He hasn't the slightest idea what is happening when he's read to, I'm sure. But I enjoy it just the same, the chance to share some stories with him that I loved as a child, and particularly some Bible stories. We got him a children's Bible. It's a board book that has a number of different stories from the Old and New Testament. And so he and I started working through it a little while ago. And I've been enjoying it immensely. And it's just a 2-page spread for each story, but it tells about the stories of like creation and Abraham and Sarah, of Moses, the Exodus. Just the other day, we got to the 2-page spread on Jonah. And I opened it up and I said to him, this is one of my favorites because it is. I love the story of Jonah. And it took all of 2 pages to read it. And it got to the end and it said, and it does this for every story, you can say I'm sorry to God. Each of these stories, it gives sort of this little summation, a takeaway for a child. And so in the Jonah story, Jonah refuses to go to Nineveh to preach the message that God has told him to preach, choosing instead to run the opposite direction, defy God's desires for him, ends up getting swallowed by a large fish, and apologizes, repents, so that he can eventually make his way to Nineveh. And so the story, as told in the children's Bible, is pulling on that thread to say that one of the messages is that we can say, I'm sorry, to God. I thought it was at once a very insightful takeaway, a perfect child-sized bite, and yet lacking so much of what I love about the story. I thought you were really going to sum it down to just that. That's it. It occurred to me that this is what is so wonderful about having scriptures that are so frequently stories. Stories do this wonderful thing where you can learn them once. You can learn the characters and the plot, and yet they can continue teaching us over and over again as we draw more from them. I wouldn't tell you today that the whole of the Jonah story teaches that we can say I'm sorry to God, though that's perhaps a good starting point. But there's so much more to it. And so we learn the story at first. And as we go on and continue on, we can continue gleaning more from it. If I were to go through some of my old Bibles where I've made notes or journals where I've made notes about scriptures, I am certain I would find that my understanding about what the scriptures are teaching has changed over time. In some instances, perhaps I've made an about face, for I know I have. Thought it used to mean one thing, now it means something else. In other instances, perhaps I have simply pivoted or gone deeper. But in every instance, I am sure that what I feel and believe today from the scriptures is different than I would have thought a decade or more ago, and is hopefully different than what I will think a decade from now. What's incredible about the scriptures, and particularly the stories, is that once you learn them, we're not done learning. They continue teaching and guiding and sharing. And so we begin as children, perhaps very young children, with a single takeaway. And it's a good place to start. And one day we might end an entirely different, deeper place. Friends, what are some of your favorite biblical stories? Have you changed your understanding about them in the time since you first learned them? Isn't that a wonderful thing about Scripture and the journey of faith? Friends, may the peace of God be with us all this day.